In 2015, Canada got its second youngest prime minister in history. Justin Trudeau was elected with a message of positivity and hope, and the media often compared him to Obama in the US. On his first day in office, he entered the Montreal metro station to take selfies with people walking along the street. The image went viral, and a sense of hope and positivity filled the air. Trudeau had the second highest approval rating of any prime minister in Canadian history, at 65%. Now that number has dropped to 22%. And what was meant to be, happened. I intend to step down as party leader and prime minister after the party elects its next leader through a vigorous national competition. Last night, I asked the Liberal leader to start that process. This country deserves a real choice in the next election, and I realized that if there was an internal fight, I could not be the best choice in the election. Yes, Justin Trudeau will resign, and he blamed internal fighting within the ruling Liberal Party for his inability to lead the party into the next election. The truth is that Trudeau was dumped because he was a bad leader who had ruined Canada. And let's take a look back at how the handsome Prime Minister has led Canada into the ground over the past 10 years.
The cost of living in Canada.
The cost of living in Canada is terrible. It's not the cost of living anymore. It's the cost of survival.
Broccoli.
2 heads of broccoli cost $11.44.
Would you pay $800 a month to
Would you pay $800 a month to share a bed with a stranger? That's the price this Vancouver listing is asking. The first and most important thing to understand is that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his government do not have absolute power over the country. Canada's legislative power is divided between the federal parliament and provincial and municipal legislatures. The federal parliament decides on national issues such as defense, finance, trade, criminal law, and immigration. Meanwhile, the provinces have jurisdiction over areas such as property rights, citizenship, education, health services, etc. Cities also have their own jurisdictions, such as drafting and enforcing land use laws, deciding how real estate is developed and used. This leads to a hypothetical situation like this. If the federal government decides to increase immigration to Canada, for example, it is the responsibility of cities to build enough housing to accommodate both new and existing residents. So, to make things work, every city councillor will be told by the federal government how many immigrants they will have to accommodate. Furthermore, they must have the capacity and tax dollars to build enough housing. The answer is a dream. Canada's history has shown that Canada is a nation of immigrants. Canadians themselves have a particularly positive attitude towards immigration. In 2018, 68% of Canadians believed that immigration was good for the country, the highest figure among OECD countries. This is because they have a merit-based immigration system. This means that anyone who wants to move to Canada has to pass certain criteria. This way, the government can make sure that only people who are useful to the economy are allowed to immigrate to Canada. Throughout its history, Canada has relied on immigration to grow its economy and population. So immigration is not something new or always a great thing about Canada. Since taking office in 2015, Prime Minister Trudeau has attracted more than 2.5 million new permanent residents, pushing Canada's population past 41 million. As of April 2024, Canada's population has surpassed 41 million, an increase of more than 1 million in less than a year since the country reached 40 million on June 16, 2023. In May 2024, Statistics Canada announced that the country's GDP grew by 0.2%, and is expected to achieve a similar growth rate in the following month. Not only that, Canada's economy also grew by 0.4% in the first quarter of 2024. Trudeau's government says it's a major achievement in the Prime Minister's economic stimulus program. Trudeau believes that by increasing immigration, he is boosting economic growth and filling gaps in the labor market. That's why Canada plans to welcome about 485,000 new immigrants by the end of 2024. In 2025, the target will increase to 500,000 and will remain at 500,000 in 2026. The problem is that at the top, the immigration flow is pushed to the maximum, while at the bottom, the cities do little. They mostly let the private sector do whatever they want to increase the difficulty of the game. There are also some ridiculous regulations, like no condos, only single-family homes, and you can guess what the consequences are. Urbanization is rampant, and a bunch of luxury homes are beyond the budget of the average Canadian. It's obvious why the hell would developers build affordable housing when they can make a fortune building luxury homes for investors. Which brings us to the next point. These properties are available to both domestic and foreign investors. That means there is no limit, no ceiling on house prices anymore.
The middle class is officially
dying. Look, the forecast is that the majority of households will no longer be able to afford to buy a house, which is one of the criteria that defines the middle class in Canada. This is the average income of the middle class in Canada according to different provinces. For example, in Ontario, the average income is $70,100. The median home price in this province is more than $800,000. This means that the median income of the buyer, whether an accountant, teacher, or nurse, is no longer considered middle class. There are too many immigrants and too few homes. But that's just part of the problem. Because Trudeau also neglected to close a loophole that temporary foreign residents could exploit. Temporary residents here we can understand as international students and seasonal foreign workers. International students enrolled in prerequisite programs such as language courses and work-study permits. However, some people have taken advantage of this, going out to work without completing the required courses. As for seasonal foreign workers, they are allowed into Canada when the Temporary Foreign Worker Program allows employers to recruit them for seasonal jobs that cannot be filled by qualified Canadians. However, some employers have hired foreign workers to fill positions that Canadians would normally fill in exchange for lower wages and poorer working conditions. So Canada has millions of temporary residents happily working for minimum wage. Real Canadians are being squeezed out of the job market. Which brings us to our next problem, the labor shortage. Is it ironic? Canadian manufacturing industries are experiencing a skills shortage. The percentage of manufacturers reporting shortages has increased to 80% by 2022, up from 39% in 2016. In just under a decade, the labor shortage has more than doubled. So how much has Trudeau's massive immigration policy actually benefited Canada? Immigrants' contributions to Canada have created an illusion of economic prosperity in the land of the maple leaf. The government likes to release positive figures to prove that the economy is still growing. But they fail to point out that this growth is largely driven by population growth, which means that per capita income is falling further and further. Meanwhile, inflation is rising, and so many people are migrating that the Bank of Canada is having a hard time clearly determining the impact of new immigrants on the economy, as well as enacting appropriate monetary policies to regulate the economy. This becomes increasingly important as the organization tries to restrain economic growth to avoid inflation or major risks. With such a down-to-earth leadership style, it's no surprise that Mr. Trudeau has been under pressure to resign for months. Political scandals during his long tenure have also added fuel to the fire. Mr. Trudeau was reprimanded in 2017 for accepting gifts, including vacations and private helicopter flights. Missing the first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation to go on a surfing vacation, and revealing that members of his family were paid hundreds of thousands of dollars by a charity that was recently awarded a major government contract, have also damaged the leader's reputation. And in the end, Trudeau is broken. But his departure doesn't mean Canada's problems will disappear overnight. Canada needs to rely on immigration to grow its economy and to shore up its rapidly aging population. Immigration is not a bad thing, but how to manage it, especially after Trudeau unleashed an influx that was beyond the country's capacity, and especially when will cities reform their rigid and outdated housing policies? What do you think about the current situation in Canada? Let Global Insights know in the comments. Now, goodbye, and see you again.